Hey guys, today's psychological ED hypnosis session is designed to give your inner critic some better choices, with the idea that when the inner critic quiets down, or maybe becomes a lot more helpful, you feel more confident. You feel more confident, you get better erections. If you want to learn more about how self talk affects ED and get some really active tools to help solve the problem, check out this other video. Otherwise, park the car, grab your headphones, and get ready to relax and just absorb for a while. We'll do a 10-second countdown, then dive right in. All right, let's get comfortable. Finding a comfortable position where you can remain still for a while. Eyes open, soft focus. Resting your hands loosely on your lap or at your sides. Picking a point across the room or on the ceiling to gaze at softly, allowing your peripheral vision to stay relaxed. As you sit there, I'll ask you to notice 3 things you can see. Maybe the color of the wall, or a shadow on the floor, or the way the light hits a part of the ceiling. Whatever you happen to notice, just take a moment to notice each one of those 3 things. Now notice 3 things you can hear. Could be anything. The sound of my voice, the distant hum of a traffic or an appliance, maybe the sound of your own breathing. Just noticing 3 things you can hear. Next, notice 3 physical sensations. The weight of your body against the chair, the texture of your sleeves or the sheets against your arms, the temperature of the air on your skin. Just noticing 3 sensations. Then narrow your focus to 2 things you can see. Just 2 distinct shapes or colors in your field of vision. Then listen for 2 distinct sounds. Maybe one close by and one further away. Then notice 2 physical sensations. Maybe the contact of your feet with the floor and the feeling of your breath moving in and out. And finally, notice 1 thing you can see. Just 1 point of focus. And then you can identify 1 single sound you can hear. Notice 1 specific physical sensation, like the pulse in your fingertip, or a feeling of relaxation in your jaw. Now, Let your eyes close gently. We're going to repeat that process, but this time, everything you notice will be from inside your mind, your imagination, or your memory. And it doesn't matter if what you see or hear or feel is perfect or meets some kind of expectation. You just are looking more for a gesture in the direction of imagining these things. With your eyes closed, imagine 3 things you can see. Maybe a peaceful place, maybe a favorite color, or a simple shape. 3 things you can imagine seeing now. Next, I'll ask you to recall or imagine 3 sounds. A soft melody, the sound of the ocean, a gentle whisper. And then I'll ask you to imagine feeling 3 internal sensations. A sense of heaviness in your arms, your legs. A feeling of warmth in your chest. Maybe a wave of relaxation flowing down your back. Now I'll ask you to imagine 2 things you can see in your mind's eye. Seeing 2 things in your mind's eye. Then listening for 2 sounds you can imagine on the inside. And then you can feel 2 internal sensations. Comfort, ease. And then you can see 1 image in your mind. Just imagining 1 image in your mind. Hearing 1 peaceful sound. Feeling 1 deep sensation of total relaxation. As you finish this cycle, you may notice that the boundary between your internal thoughts and the external world has begun to comfortably soften. You might find yourself in a state of focused, calm awareness. And you can allow yourself to rest even deeper now, knowing that your unconscious mind is ready to work on whatever goals you have set for this session. Because if you're like a lot of guys, you may have the tendency to be very hard on yourself, to be tough with yourself. which for many basically means talking to yourself in a really mean way, making a lot of negative predictions about things, calling yourself names, criticizing, rating yourself, all that stuff. And for a lot of guys, when they treat themselves this way, it affects their sexual performance. Their nervous system perceives the internal dialogue, perceives that kind of thinking as a threat. The guys go into fight or flight mode, and the blood goes out of the crotch and out into the arms and legs where it can be used to run or fight, if there were something to actually run or fight against. So let's see if we might be able to find some better choices for you today. Some other options that can open up with learning. And some of the learning may be conscious. Very simply, getting some new information in your brain that inspires you to make new choices for the way you relate to yourself. Some of the learning may be unconscious. The felt sense of relief in the body that comes with permission to explore other choices that feel better, that work better. Because at its core, hypnosis is all about learning. Easy learning. And your learning processes inside while you rest. And you can continue to rest now. Maybe even resting deeper with each exhalation you make. In the rest, your unconscious will pay attention to what is important already. You're learning while you rest. And your learning processes inside while you rest. In the rest, your unconscious will pay attention to what is important to you, about just letting some of these ideas we're going to talk about just kind of soak in, letting go of the analysis for a while, listening like the way you'd listen to soft music, just kind of uncritically enjoying it. Because my guess is that you know how to let go of criticism when you listen to soft music. You know how to enjoy the experience of just letting yourself experience music. If you like, you can let this be like that. Other things as well. Because maybe there was a time in your life when you let things be easier. Even though you may not remember those times consciously. Maybe you've seen the absolute delight on your face in an old photo of you when you were a little kid. That level of absolute joy a baby can have with simple experience. That's natural. But what can happen to some people, according to the developmental psychologists, usually around the ages of 4 or 5 years old, is they can start to speak to themselves in some not very nice ways, usually in imitation of someone or someones in their environment. It starts innocently, but it can turn into a habit that can last for a lifetime. Which is why it can be nice to take a fresh look at that old script. Is it working? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. That voice doesn't keep working off that old script because it's stupid or it's evil. It's done for positive reasons. There's always some kind of positive intent behind it. It's trying to get something positive accomplished. Or maybe there's something it's afraid of, and it thinks that being hyper negative is the best way to stay safe. Either or both ways, It's just trying to do its job with the only script you had available when you were 4 or 5 years old. So we could talk about giving it some new options. But when the subject of changing that script comes up, a lot of guys' first reaction is,
No. Being hard on myself is what made me a success.
but that kind of thinking reminds me a little bit about what some folks say about the autobiographies of corporate leaders, where some hyper-successful CEO will say, "My doing X is what made my company a success." But there's no control group. So we really don't know if that's true or he became a success in spite of the fact that he did X. Because the next book on the shelf may be one where the guy says, not doing X is what made my company a success. So what if you've been successful in spite of that tendency to be hard on yourself? Or at minimum, you'd have to consider the idea that you have choice in the way you relate to yourself, just like you have choice in the way you treat other people. And maybe just because being mean to yourself in one area of your life has worked, it doesn't necessarily mean that it works everywhere. Or so the evidence would suggest if you're listening to this. So regardless of how you might feel about this, I'll invite you to open up and just listen for a while. You don't have to agree. You don't have to disagree. You don't have to analyze. You don't have to take any notes. You don't even have to feel like what I say is relevant to your situation in any way. Just absorbing some of the ideas and noticing what it might be like for your body and your mind to begin to see more. To see past some of the same old scripts and tools, or to be reminded of some truths that you may have forgotten about. And as you listen to the sound of my voice, you can just drift or rest more deeply with each breath out you make. I'll ask you to begin by imagining a bright sunny day. A small crowd of parents sits in the bleachers at a kid's Little League baseball game. One of the kids is warming up his swing, getting ready to take the plate. Then his dad leans over and says,
"You're a loser. You've struck out the last 3 times you've been at bat. You'll probably strike out again. Why do you always have to fuck up at game time? If only you were better, then maybe I could love you."
How do you think that kid is going to feel as he walks up toward the plate? What kind of emotions do you think he'd be experiencing? How confident do you think he'd be? And when he feels that way, how well do you think he's likely to hit? It's a little like a client I worked with a while back, a guy with an anger issue. When he first contacted me, he included the text that his wife had just sent him, where she said that if he didn't stop being so mean to their kids, if he didn't stop being so mean to her, she was going to divorce him. And he was terrified, because if he didn't change, this would be the second time this had happened to him, the second time he'd had a woman divorce him for being so mean. He was a guy who, anytime his wife didn't meet his rigid expectations, anytime his sons didn't meet his rigid expectations, he'd explode and be really mean to them. And in his mind, it wasn't a choice. It was automatic. It was who he was. But after he got that text, he decided that he needed to change. It was urgent that he change. It was time to change. So we started to talk. In a different way, he reminds me of another client I talked with, someone I think I've mentioned before. He came to me because he couldn't work on his PhD thesis. He just couldn't start. And pretty quickly, it became obvious why. He had internalized the voice of his Marine drill sergeant. So every time he sat down to write, the voice in his head was saying,
"You fucking maggot! I can't believe you haven't gotten this thing written yet. You fucking piece of shit!"
etc., etc., etc. And every time he heard this voice, he'd freeze, he'd lock up. He couldn't get a single word into his PhD document. And the thing was, it was so automatic, and he was so used to it, that he was barely aware that he was even doing it. It's kind of like another client I worked with a public speaking issue, a finance guy. All his life, he had been driving himself to win, to achieve. He was cruel to himself, but it seemed to have worked to some degree. He was successful financially, but he was also miserable. He was tormenting himself, constant negativity and criticism, to the point where he was having panic attacks before presentations because he was putting so much pressure on himself to succeed. It just wasn't working anymore. And that's the thing. So much of what I do with the guys I work with is helping them get to the point of, oh, what I've been doing isn't working anymore. What other options do I have? What other choices could I begin to try? It's like, did you ever see that old Tom Hanks movie, A League of Their Own? Hanks plays a baseball coach working with a team of women during World War II. At the start, he's super harsh with the players, an old school mean coach, coaching the way he'd been coached. The pretty classic line he says,
"There's no crying in baseball!"
He says it after he treats one of the players so badly that she breaks down in tears. And that's when he starts to realize that that style of coaching isn't working. So as the story progresses, he makes the effort to change. Even though it's uncomfortable and different, he changes his coaching style. And the more he changes it, the better the results are. So he gets that reinforcement, the wins. Hey, this new way just works better. In Hoosiers, another old sports movie, Gene Hackman starts the movie as a coach being super harsh with his high school basketball players. But what he finds, like Hanks, is that it's not working. Kids don't play well under that kind of pressure. So as the film progresses, he listens more. He starts working with the kids instead of against them, helping them. And when they win the state championship, it's a direct result of the way he changed his style. And it's not just movies. In real life, there are lots of stories like this. Do you know who Helen Keller was? She was a woman who was both blind and deaf, who went on to accomplish some pretty amazing things in her life. She was able to go to college, write books. She's even the founder of the ACLU. When she was very young, her teacher was a woman named Anne Sullivan. And when they started, Sullivan's style was very strict and very high pressure. But she could see pretty quickly that it just wasn't working. Keller wasn't learning. She was shutting down. So Sullivan changed her style. She began to listen a lot more. She began to work with her a lot more, support her a lot more, help her a lot more. And pretty soon, Keller was blooming, accomplishing things most people wouldn't have ever thought possible for her. It's like the miracle on ice. Have you ever heard about that? It's what happened in 1980 when the U.S. Olympic hockey team beat the supposedly invincible Soviets. A guy named Herb Brooks was the coach. And when he started, he was deliberately ruthless and cold and demanding, and he'd drive the players through these brutal sprints until their legs failed. And he was doing it as a way of deliberately making them hate him so that they'd learn to rely on one another. But once they had that, once they were working together as a team well, he pivoted. He switched from being a total tyrant to being a quiet believer. He stopped tearing them down and started building them up. Then, right before the supposedly impossible game against the Soviets, this guy who had just ridden them all seasons delivered a message of just pure empowerment. You were born to be players. You were meant to be here. And against the unbelievable odds, the U.S. team won what's still considered by many people to be one of the greatest sports victories of all time. But it's not just sports, it's business too. Have you ever heard about Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO? Before he took over in 2014, Microsoft was notorious for having a hyper-competitive, really abrasive internal culture. Managers were encouraged to be tough, and the practice of regularly firing the bottom 10% of performers created this climate of fear and negativity. Nadella pivoted the entire company toward a growth mindset culture. He emphasized empathy as a core business value, encouraged collaboration over competition, and shifted from criticizing failures to supporting experimentation. Under this supportive approach, Microsoft's market cap skyrocketed. Employee morale reached record highs, and the company successfully transitioned from a stagnating legacy business to a cloud computing powerhouse. It's widely cited as the most successful corporate turnaround in history. So this isn't like one of those biographies where it's just him that's saying it, like everybody says it. He didn't turn the corporate culture to a much nicer one just because it was a nice thing to do. He did it because it works better now. Like, have you ever heard about Admiral Horatio Nelson? He was an officer in the British Navy. When he started his career, the Navy was run through fear and the lash. Yeah, they literally whipped guys for not meeting expectations. Nelson shifted command toward a more supportive, more fraternal style of leadership. He called his captains his band of brothers, and he encouraged initiative and personal growth instead of just pressure and blind obedience. This shift in morale and flexibility of approach is often cited by historians as the reason his fleet outperformed the more rigid French and Spanish fleets at Trafalgar, the history-making sea battle. And the really cool thing is that this transition from mean to kind is supported by decades of behavioral science, organizational psychology, and neuroscience. Research consistently shows that while harshness can trigger short-term compliance through fear, it actually shuts down the parts of the brain required for long-term growth and high performance. In 2012, Google launched a massive internal research project called Project Aristotle. They wanted to find out why some of their teams thrived while others failed. They looked at every variable: education, hobbies, even whether team members ate lunch together. What they found was that the number one predictor of a high-performing team wasn't IQ or technical skill, it was psychological safety. Psychological safety is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for making a mistake or asking a question. You're safe now. Teams with mean or abrasive leaders had members who spent all their energy trying to perform or to try to hide mistakes. Teams with supportive leaders who encouraged risk-taking were significantly more innovative and hit their targets faster. My office is here in Boston. We have Google right across the river. And I often say to guys, they're not offering the roaming chair masseuses and the free sushi lunches over there because they're just naturally so kind-hearted. They're not treating their employees that well out of pure kindness. They're doing it because it works better. People perform better when they're treated with kindness. Research by Dr. John Gottman looked at the ratio of positive to negative interactions in high-performing versus low-performing teams. He found the highest performing teams had a ratio of roughly 5 positive comments for every 1 negative or critical comment. A mean leader who only gives negative feedback, even if it's truthful, eventually creates a toxic environment where the brain enters a permanent state of threat mode. In threat mode, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain used for problem solving, performs worse. And as you probably know, there's some other areas of your body that don't do so well in threat mode either. So the conclusion Gottman came to is that kindness isn't just nice for being nice. It's the biological fuel that allows the brain to function at its peak cognitive level.
It feels good.
Oh, and by the way, works pretty well for some other areas in the body as well. Researchers Deci and Ryan found that one of humans' basic psychological needs is for autonomy, freedom. Abrasive coaching crushes that feeling of autonomy. It makes the person feel like a pawn being moved by a master on a chessboard. And this kills intrinsic motivation. Whatever people are being hyper-pressured to do, they tend to stop liking it. And that's where I'll hear clients say that they don't even want to have sex anymore. They've basically pressured themselves into a bad feeling about it. So, as an alternative, the researchers studied what they called autonomy supportive coaching.
It's a choice.
It gives people more choices and more support. Basically, it's about being more kind.
It feels safe.
The result? Their research and other research in sports psychology consistently shows that athletes with autonomy supportive coaches, kind coaches, have higher levels of persistence, lower burnout rates, and better performance under pressure. As I see guys make this kind of progress in my practice, what they find is not only are they performing better, but just as important, they're actually liking sex again.
Liking sex again.
So that finance client I mentioned with the public speaking issue, when he started being nicer to himself, he wasn't so afraid of what would happen if he made a mistake.
Kindness.
He created more room, more space for himself. And when he wasn't so afraid anymore, his experience of presenting was fine. He could breathe again. He could smile a little. He could actually look forward to it. When the client who had been being a bit of a drill sergeant with himself just stopped, and he found he could choose to take a more supportive role with himself, helping himself to be creative and right. It wasn't like the angels came out and sang and he finished his thesis in a day, but he was able to write normally again. Step by step, he was able to get it done and feel better in the process. That's when things get sustainable, when you feel good again. In the anger client I mentioned, the guy who was yelling at his wife and kids, when he finally decided to treat his son differently, with more kindness, as counterintuitive and difficult as it felt to him at the time, as unnatural as it felt to him at the time, he got the reward when he did it. The reaction from his son was completely different. He got love back instead of fear. That's what it took, just that one time, for him to see that being kind works a lot better. And he got hooked on that love he got in return. It took some practice for him to get consistent with it, but when he got hooked on that loving reaction he got when he would choose to be kind, everything changed. And it generalized. So pretty quickly, he was being kind with his wife and his other kids as well. And the kinder he was with his kids and his wife, the more love he got back. The more love he got back, the more kind he wanted to be with his wife and his kids. So, if you think all the way back to that sunny day and that kid playing baseball that I asked you to imagine, getting ready to bat, and instead, you imagine his dad as being 100% supportive, being 100% accepting, regardless of his son's performance, being 100% loving, regardless of the performance. The difference in how that kid would feel if he knew his dad was on his side, supporting him, accepting him, regardless of how well he swung the bat when he got to the plate. That's probably a kid who's going to be able to relax and have fun and perform naturally. That's probably a kid who's going to be able to relax and have fun and perform naturally. That's probably a kid who's going to be able to relax, have fun, and perform naturally. That's probably a kid who's going to be able to relax and have fun, perform naturally. So, taking as much time as you like to let this settle. In whatever way feels good to you, whatever way feels right to you. Trusting your unconscious to continue to generalize anything you've found here today that's healthy and positive and opens up new choices for you. Outside of your conscious awareness, if you choose to emerge and go about your day knowing that as you sleep tonight, your unconscious can organize these learnings in whatever way feels good to you, to allow more and more of this good, healthy, positive energy to move through your body at all the right times and all the right places. And of course, if you'd rather drift off and sleep now, you can do so knowing your unconscious can begin now to generalize these learnings in whatever way feels good to you, to allow more and more of this good, healthy, positive energy to move through your body, your mind, your thoughts, making all the right new connections, letting go of any old ones that no longer serve you at all the right times and all the right places while you sleep deeply and comfortably. So, taking as much time as you like to drift off into a deep, comfortable sleep, if that's what you'd like. Or if you'd like to emerging from the conversation with a fresh perspective, a fresh spark, a new energy, whenever you're ready to open up your eyes and move into your day refreshed with a new set of choices. Enjoy. Welcome back. And take a moment. Just notice how you feel. Maybe a sense of mental calm, or maybe a more physical sense of relaxation, or maybe even a little spark of excitement. Because the work you've done today can shift those old patterns. That state of relaxation in your body can be its way of saying yes to moving forward this way. So I really hope this helps you. And please keep in mind, in terms of results, the more you're able to listen, the better. With stuff like this, repetition definitely helps. Oh, And if you want a quick, in-the-moment tool for when you're going into a sexy situation for right before it, just click the link in the description down below. I designed the session specifically to help you resolve those pre-performance jitters. It's called the Pressure Release Reset, it's Hypnosis, and it's totally free. If you'd like to have this ready for the next time you need it, again, just click in the description down below. Thanks for watching.